You don't know your place, and you dare to put yourself on the same level as my daughter-in-law, the pharmacist. You come from a blue-collar background, do you understand? It was the first time I had ever been slapped in my life. With the sharp crack, my vision blurred for a moment. In the silence that followed, a mocking laugh floated in the air. My sister-in-law, Jessica, covered her mouth, feigning surprise, but her eyes were clearly making fun of me. In that instant, my husband, Mike, a quiet man who normally never contradicted his mother, kicked the coffee table with a furious roar. As of today, we're cutting ties, Mom. I hope you and your magnificent pharmacist daughter-in-law have a wonderful life, forever and ever. Leaving his mother, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, behind, Mike and I walked out the door, about to find a miraculous turn in our lives, and witness the tragic end that awaited a family doomed to misfortune. Let me tell you all about it. They say everyone carries a sorrow in their heart they can never share. But my story could be the plot of a lifetime movie. My day began at dawn, when most people are still lost in their dreams. The moment I opened my eyes, I would leave the house with the determination of a soldier heading to the front lines. Ever since my husband's home renovation business collapsed, and the calls from creditors became a constant harassment, I swore to myself that I would never fall again, that I would protect my family with everything I had. By day, I worked as a certified nursing assistant, CNA, in a hospital, enduring the complaints and demands of patients. When my shift ended, without a moment's rest, I would rush to the kitchen of a local restaurant. I'd pull on a pair of rubber gloves and face a mountain of dirty dishes. That was my routine. After 14 hours of work each day, the soles of my feet would burn and my calves would be so swollen they felt like they were about to burst. But the physical exhaustion was bearable. The sweat from my effort and the money I saw growing in our bank account gave me hope that my family could get back on its feet. What truly broke me wasn't the hard work, but the discrimination and contempt I suffered from my in-laws. My parents-in-law had saved nothing for their retirement and depended completely on their children. But my mother-in-law had a very solid safety net. My brother-in-law, David, and his wife, Jessica, who was 3 years younger than me. He was a senior researcher at a major pharmaceutical company, and she, my sister-in-law, owned the largest and most prosperous pharmacy in the area. They had given my mother-in-law a credit card with a generous monthly allowance. They were the pride and economic engine of the family. The tragedy began because, as I also worked in the healthcare sector, the professions of the two daughters-in-law subtly overlapped. We both worked to care for the sick, but in my mother-in-law's eyes, the difference in status was like heaven and earth. There's just no comparison, is there? One is doctor. Jessica, a professional who dispenses medicine, and the other is just an aide who cleans up after doctors, my mother-in-law remarked casually during a family dinner. I had to put my spoon down mid-bite. My face burned with shame, and I wished the ground would swallow me whole. I had always been proud of living an honest, hard-working life, but with a single sentence from her, all my efforts were reduced to nothing. Weekend family dinners were like a second shift for me. I would arrive at my in-laws' house, exhausted after a week of non-stop work, and my mother-in-law, as if waiting for me, would toss an apron at me. In contrast, when Jessica arrived, she would rush to greet her at the door, practically carrying her in, and hurry to take her purse. "Oh, my dear pharmacist, you're here. You must be so tired, on your feet all day. With those valuable hands, you can't be doing any heavy lifting. Come in, and have some fruit." My mother-in-law would take Jessica's hands as if they were delicate glass and seat her in the best spot on the sofa. Then she would glance over at me, huddled in a corner of the kitchen, shelling peas, and her tone would change completely. "Hey you, what are you doing just standing there? Your sister-in-law is here. At least offer her a glass of water. Since your job at the hospital is just wiping patients' butts and doing physical labor, a little housework won't be anything for you. Come on, set the table. We're hungry." My heart sank. It hurt that she belittled my work of caring for patients, but what truly angered me was her assumption that I should handle all the cooking, knowing full well how hard I worked outside the home. Was physical labor my calling? There's no job in the world that isn't hard, but my mother-in-law's logic was simple. My sister-in-law's job, which earned a lot of money and held high social status, was noble. Mine, drowning in debt, was little more than that of a servant. While I was in the kitchen preparing a meal for 10 people, listening to the clinking of dishes, laughter echoed from the living room, or my mother-in-law exclaimed in awe at the expensive vitamins and the gourmet gift basket from Whole Foods that Jessica had brought. Oh my goodness, what is all this? There's no one like my younger daughter-in-law. So thoughtful. Others show up empty-handed to freeload. But you, what a big heart you have. Show up empty-handed to freeload. Those words stabbed me in the back like daggers. Did I want to come empty-handed? Between the kids' after-school activities, the interest on my husband's business loans, and worrying about making ends meet, even buying a box of fruit made my hand tremble. Without time to dry my tears, I tasted the stew, and a bitter flavor filled my mouth. When I set the table, Jessica, sitting elegantly, wiped her hands with a wet wipe while looking at me. Sarah, I'm so sorry, I should be helping, but lately I've developed carpal tunnel from filling so many prescriptions. The doctor told me not to lift anything heavy or strain my hands. You, on the other hand, are in incredible physical shape. Between the hospital and the restaurant, I'd be dead after just one day on my feet. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a dig. I felt like, under the guise of her own weakness, she was subtly calling me a brute. The comparison between her flawless white hands without a single scratch and mine, rough from cleaning chemicals and covered in several band-aids, made me quickly hide them under the table. Oh, please, this one's built from different stuff. She doesn't even notice things like that. You two are a different breed. You need to protect those valuable, life-saving hands, my mother-in-law said, backing Jessica up as she placed the best deboned piece of fish on her plate. A lump formed in my throat, and I couldn't swallow my food. My husband, noticing, put a piece of steak on my plate, but a wounded heart can't be mended with a piece of meat. After dinner, as I faced a mountain of dirty dishes, the sounds of laughter and merriment came from the living room as they ate fruit. I pulled on the rubber gloves and sighed deeply. Just then, Jessica walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and spoke to me in a low voice. Sarah, aren't you exhausted? I don't think I could survive a single day living like you. You're admirable. Hey, by the way, since you're such a good cook, could you help me out when I have my housewarming party for my new place? I'm terrible in the kitchen. Of course, I'll compensate you for your trouble. In that instant, I almost dropped the plate I was washing. Pay me for my work. Her attitude hiring me instead of asking for help as family felt profoundly humiliating. As much as I needed the money, there was something called family respect. But it was clear Jessica didn't see me as her sister-in-law, but as cheap labor to be used when needed. Jessica, what are you saying? It's normal for family to help each other, but to talk about payment. Are you treating me like a maid? When I asked, my voice trembling, she widened her eyes with an expression of pure innocence. Whoa, Sarah, don't take it the wrong way. I was just trying to help, knowing your situation. People charge a fortune for catering, and I thought it would be better to give the money to you, since you're family, than to a stranger. I offered it with the best intentions, but if it bothered you, I'm sorry. Without a hint of remorse, she shrugged and returned to the living room. I stood there, paralyzed, watching the water run. Rage consumed me. But then I thought of the credit card bill and the kids' school tuition, and I felt so pathetic and miserable for not even being able to speak up for myself. That night, on the drive home, I stared out the window without a word. My husband took my hand and said he was sorry, that I just had to hang in there a little longer, but his words were no comfort. In my head, all I could see was my mother-in-law's cold stare and Jessica's smug smile. Fine. I don't have money now, so they look down on me. But do they think this will last forever? They'll see. I will succeed, and I'll shut them all up. I clenched my fists, making a promise to myself. But at that moment, I didn't know that their contempt and discrimination wouldn't just be words, but would escalate into bolder and more terrible insults, and I couldn't even imagine the humiliations I would have to endure to stand up to their tyranny. The following weekend, another call from my mother-in-law. This time, it seemed she had summoned me for a very specific purpose. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the strong smell of roasting meat and a kitchen full of ingredients scattered on the floor. My mother-in-law, lying on the sofa watching TV, said as soon as she saw me. "Ah, you're here, good. I need to make a big pot roast for Jessica, but my back is killing me. I can't do a thing. You're good in the kitchen, so take care of prepping everything and let it simmer on low." Jessica said she's been feeling really run down lately. I couldn't believe it. She wouldn't lift a finger and expected me to do all that work. And for Jessica, the one who looked down on me. As I stood there, hesitating, my mother-in-law shot me a reproachful look. "What are you doing just standing there? If the only thing you have to offer is your strength, are you going to argue with what your mother-in-law asks of you? Go on, change your clothes, and start chopping the vegetables." I swallowed my anger and went to the kitchen. Staring at the vegetables on the cutting board, I thought, is this a family, or am I the unpaid servant of this house? But what I didn't know then was that this pot roast incident was just the prelude to the storm that was coming. The dreaded holiday season, feared by all daughters-in-law. For me, Thanksgiving wasn't just a day of physical exhaustion, but a day my soul was torn to shreds. On Thanksgiving morning, I had to rush to my mother-in-law's house at dawn and put on an apron. My mother-in-law, using the excuse of a sore back or dizziness, would lock herself in her room, and the enormous kitchen became my personal battleground. I fried onions for the stuffing until the smell of oil seeped into every pore of my skin. I made the green bean casserole and mashed the potatoes. By the time I was done, the sun had set and the sky was dark. Just as my back felt like it was about to break, and my legs were so swollen I couldn't feel them, the doorbell rang. "Mom, I'm here." The traffic was a nightmare. That's why we're late. Jessica, in an elegant dress and perfect makeup, appeared with several designer shopping bags in her hands. My mother-in-law, who was supposedly sick, jumped up as if nothing was wrong and ran to greet her. In Jessica's hands were an artisanal charcuterie board and boxes of expensive supplements from the pharmacy. I, in my grease-stained apron, watched the scene from a corner of the kitchen. "Oh, honey, what took you so long? With all this traffic, why did you bring so many things?" Just having you here was enough. My mother-in-law wouldn't let go of her hand, and her affection was so over the top that for a moment, I felt like I wasn't part of the family, but just an employee using a stranger's kitchen. Jessica then glanced towards the kitchen and walked in without a trace of shame. "Sarah, did you do all this by yourself? I'm so sorry. I got held up closing the pharmacy. Do you need help with anything?" The food was already done. All that was left was to wash the dishes. Her offer was a mere formality, an empty phrase. That night, the Thanksgiving dinner table was set with my sweat and tears, but all the praise and affection went to Jessica, who had brought an envelope of cash and expensive gifts. In front of all the relatives, my mother-in-law couldn't stop praising her. As I ate cold leftovers in a corner of the kitchen, listening to it all, I finally understood. In that house, a daughter-in-law's worth was measured exclusively in dollars. But what truly crushed me and made me feel miserable wasn't the exploitation of my labor, but an incident that trampled on my pride as a mother. One day, my husband was out of town for work, and I had no one to watch the kids. My own mother was sick, so I couldn't ask her. Desperate, I gathered my courage and called my mother-in-law. "Mom, I'm so sorry to bother you, but could you possibly watch the kids this afternoon? Just for 3 hours, please." On the other end of the line, I heard her irritated voice. "Sarah, my back is hurting so much right now, I can barely move. How am I supposed to watch the children? I can hardly take care of myself. If you have so many problems, just quit your job. What's the point of working so much if you don't even have anyone to leave your kids with?" With the excuse of her pain, she flatly refused and hung up on me. Sadness washed over me, but there was nothing I could do. In the end, I had to beg the restaurant owner to let me bring the kids with me. I sat them at a small table in the back and started washing dishes. I remember crying in secret as I watched them doing their homework in that cramped corner. But a few days later, while passing by Jessica's neighborhood by chance, I witnessed a scene that left me frozen. My mother-in-law, the one who supposedly couldn't move because of her back pain, was playing with Jessica's son at the playground with an enviable energy and vitality, feeding the boy snacks with a huge smile on her face. The betrayal left me breathless. My children had been doing their homework crammed in a corner of a restaurant, while Jessica's son received his grandmother's most devoted care. With trembling legs, I approached her. When she saw me, my mother-in-law didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at me defiantly. "Mom, I thought your back hurt. You can't watch my kids, but you can watch your other daughter-in-laws? How can you discriminate against your own grandchildren so blatantly?" When I confronted her, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue and responded with an insolence that left me speechless. What came out of her mouth next drove a nail into my heart that I can never remove. "Hey, are you comparing yourself to Jessica? This boy has a pharmacist's blood. He was born with brains. He's a valuable grandchild. You're nothing more than a glorified orderly at the hospital. Like mother, like child. A glorified orderly." That's how she referred to my profession as a CNA. It was absolute contempt for me, a woman who was working herself to the bone day and night to pay off debts and support my family. In that moment, something inside me broke. I understood that I wasn't dealing with an elder I should respect, but someone with whom it was impossible to reason. "Mom, watch your words. My job is not shameful, and my children are not less than anyone. Are the children of the daughter-in-law who doesn't earn money not your grandchildren?" When I shouted, furious, my mother-in-law turned sharply, pushing the stroller. "Shut up. Don't make a scene in the street. Get lost." Shortly after, the news that Jessica had expanded her pharmacy and bought an entire building made the family atmosphere even worse. Now, everything in that house was measured by money and social class. Jessica, using the excuse of being busy, stopped showing up for family events. Not for Christmas, not for my mother-in-law's birthday. She'd just send an envelope with cash. But my mother-in-law, far from complaining, would smile from ear to ear. Nowadays, a daughter-in-law who earns well and has a good social position is the one who really proves her worth. What's the use of coming here to work like a mule? My Jessica, now that she's a property owner, she's in a different league. My mother-in-law would brag in front of relatives, waving the envelope Jessica had sent. And all the hard work to fill that void fell on me, the low-class daughter-in-law. According to her logic, I was less than a maid. Jessica's envelope was proof of her filial love, and my drops of sweat were proof of my incompetence. The house had become a living hell. Sometimes Jessica would call me and say with an air of generosity, "Sarah, sorry I couldn't make it this time, but I gave Mom a nice bonus, so make her something special. Oh, and if you need any money for your trouble, just let me know." Every time I heard that, I felt an uncontrollable urge to smash the phone against the wall. Even if money makes the world go round, I couldn't stand this reality where even within a family, hierarchy was established by money, and human dignity was trampled. Life is strange. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, you discover there's an even deeper basement waiting for you. My husband's business, which had at least been keeping us afloat, came to a complete halt with the economic downturn. Mike started going to the day labor pickup spots at dawn, but almost always came back empty-handed. To make matters worse, the restaurant where I worked had to cut my hours due to a lack of customers. We didn't have money for the kids' after-school activities for the following week. The bills were piling up, the credit card payment was due, and our bank account was at zero. I felt like I was drowning. One day, I got a call from my mother-in-law. It was strange because she never called to see how we were. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Sarah, are you busy? Swing by the house for a minute. I have some great news for you." Great news. For a moment, I had the vain hope that she was going to give us some money. I rushed to her house, but what she told me when I walked in made me doubt what I was hearing. "I've been thinking, and I believe I have the perfect job for you. Jessica is so busy with the pharmacy she can't keep up at home. She doesn't have time to cook for the kids, or clean, or do the laundry. Since you're so good with your hands, what do you think about going over on weekends to help her out?" I was frozen. Go to Jessica's house to help her? "Mom, what do you mean? You want me to work as a maid in her house?" When I asked, bewildered, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue and continued, "Maid? What an ugly word. It's family helping family. Jessica said she'd give you about $500 a month for your trouble. Where else are you going to earn that kind of money just working on weekends? It's much more comfortable than washing dishes in a restaurant. And the money's not bad. Besides, she'd rather have someone from the family do it than a stranger. Spending my entire weekend cleaning, doing laundry, and cooking for Jessica's family, the very person who despised me for only $500, if I calculated the hourly rate, it was less than minimum wage. And above all, there was my dignity as the older sister-in-law. How can I go to my sister-in-law's house and work for money, Mom? As much as I need the money, that's not right. I'm not going to be her maid. I can't do it. When I refused firmly, my mother-in-law's expression turned icy. Dignity? What dignity are you talking about when you can't even pay for your kids' activities? Does dignity put food on the table? Jessica is offering you a job because she knows you're struggling, and instead of being grateful, you get all high and mighty. You're turning down a golden opportunity. An opportunity? This wasn't an opportunity. It was a humiliation. But the reality of not having the $300 for my son's tutoring the next day tied my hands. If I told Mike, I would only worry him, and I couldn't ask my own family for money. I closed my eyes and pictured my children's faces. Finally, I bit my lip and lowered my head. Okay, I'll do it. That weekend, I went to Jessica's apartment with a heavy heart, like a lamb to the slaughter. I rang the doorbell. When she opened the door, the house was a disaster. Toys all over the floor, a sink full of dirty dishes, and damp, mildew-smelling clothes on the drying rack. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming. Lately, with the pharmacy expansion, I just don't have time for anything. And the house is a mess. Jessica greeted me pleasantly, but there was a glint of superiority in her eyes. I put on an apron and started cleaning in silence. At first, she seemed to feel a little guilty. Sarah, I'm sorry. Everything's so dirty. I just can't keep up. Let me make you a coffee. But that guilt only lasted the first week. As I came every weekend to do the chores, Jessica started treating me like an employee. It was during the second weekend. I was scrubbing mold in the bathroom, sweating profusely. When I came out, Jessica was lying on the sofa watching TV and said nonchalantly, Sarah, you didn't clean the fridge very well last time. The Tupperware still had some sauce stains, and I had to wash them again. Be more careful this time, please. My gloved hands trembled. I was working for money, yes, but I was still her sister-in-law. Her tone was unacceptable. Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't notice. I'll clean it again, I replied, swallowing my rage. But she didn't stop there, and started adding more tasks. And this week, wash the comforters too. You just have to throw them in the dryer. It's nothing. Oh, and the kids loved the meatballs you made. They want more. Make some other appetizers too. All the ingredients are in the fridge. She would say please, but it sounded like an order. I spent the entire weekend as the servant of her house. I did 3 loads of laundry, scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees, and spent hours in the kitchen preparing food, unable to straighten my back for a moment. And despite it all, Jessica never even said thank you. She just lay on the sofa, scrolling through her phone as if it were the most normal thing in the world. At lunchtime, it didn't even cross her mind to make me something. She opened a food delivery app and muttered to herself, I'm starving. What should I order? Sarah, you want anything? Oh, since you're probably busy, I'll just get a pizza so you can eat quickly. Okay? I ate a cold, dry slice of pizza in a corner of the kitchen table with a lump in my throat. Meanwhile, Jessica and her kids sat at the large dining room table eating sushi and other restaurant dishes, laughing loudly. I felt invisible. For $500 I have to put up with this? Self-pity washed over me. But when I saw the $500 deposited in my account and thought about how I could pay for my kids' activities with it, I went back to Jessica's house every weekend, feeling incredibly miserable. One day, while I was washing dishes, I overheard Jessica talking on the phone behind me. Yeah, Mom. No, I didn't hire a maid. I just have Sarah come over. She can use the money, so it's a win-win. If I hire a cleaning lady, I have to watch her, worry about things going missing. With Sarah, I don't have that problem. Besides, I just give it to her like an allowance. Like an allowance. When I heard that, I almost dropped the plate. Jessica didn't see me as family, but as a cheap, reliable, and safe made. Sarah, when you're done with the dishes, dust the balcony window frames. With all the pollution lately, they're filthy. Jessica hung up the phone and assigned me another task as if nothing had happened. I fought back tears and went to the balcony. As I cleaned the frames, I saw happy families out for a walk through the window. I wanted to play with my kids, cook something nice with my husband, rest. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed them. I clung to the belief that this humiliation would end one day, but Jessica's abuse didn't stop there. They say if kindness is extended too long, it becomes an entitlement. As I did my work without complaining, Jessica began to cross more and more lines. After several months of non-stop work between the hospital, the restaurant, and Jessica's house on weekends, my body gave out. I spent several days in bed, staring at the ceiling, as hot tears rolled down my pillow. For just $500, my body was wrecked, and my dignity was in tatters. I made a decision. No more. If my body broke down, who would take care of my kids? I wouldn't do it anymore. That weekend, as soon as I walked through Jessica's door, I told her firmly, "Jessica, today is my last day. I'm not feeling well. I can't continue." Hearing my words, her eyes widened, and instead of concern for me, she got angry. "What? Sarah, what are you saying? So suddenly, it's hard to find someone now. How can you just leave me high and dry like this? With how much you need the money, you're going to give up $500. Her attitude, prioritizing her own convenience over my health, destroyed what little esteem I had left for her. The money is fine, but my health comes first. The doctor's bills will cost more. I'm sorry, but find someone else. I turned to leave, but she blocked my path, and with an expression of extreme generosity, made me an incredible offer. "Wait, Sarah, listen to me. I've been thinking, since you work so hard, I'll raise your pay to $1,000. What do you think? Double. $1,000. For a moment, honestly, the number made me hesitate, but seeing the greedy glint in her eyes, I knew. Nothing is free in this life. She would ask for something more in return. But there's a condition. It's nothing big. Since you're an early riser anyway, you could just stop by on weekday mornings and make breakfast for my husband and the kids. I've been learning to play golf lately, and I just don't have the time. A little soup and a few side dishes is enough. It's easy, right? Honestly, Sarah, with your resume, where are you going to make $1,000 so easily? It's better to come to your sister-in-law's warm house to make breakfast than to wash dishes in some stranger's restaurant. I'm telling you this for your own good. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not just weekend cleaning, but now I had to come make breakfast on weekdays. And that tone, mentioning my resume and treating me like a restaurant worker. Jessica didn't see me as family, but as cheap labor she could buy with money. Make breakfast. Jessica, are you insane? Am I your maid? Don't cross the line. I don't need your money. Who do you think I am? When I yelled at her, enraged, she snorted disdainfully and crossed her arms. Wow, Sarah, don't be like that. I was offering it with you in mind. You can't even give your own mother an allowance, and you've got such a big ego. Honestly, with your skills, you won't find such a comfortable, well-paying job. I was doing you a favor, but you're just ungrateful. If you don't want it, fine. It's not like I'm short on people. Her audacity made me tremble with rage. It wasn't worth arguing anymore. I ran out of her apartment. In the elevator mirror, my face was flushed with anger. I swore I would never set foot in that house again, and went home. But my ordeal wasn't over. Jessica must have run to my mother-in-law and twisted the story, making me out to be a greedy daughter-in-law who didn't know her place. A few days later, I received a summons from my mother-in-law. "Come to the house this weekend." Immediately, I told Jessica to come too. We need to have a family meeting. Family meeting. It sounded nice, but I knew it was just an excuse to attack me. I didn't want to go, but if I didn't, they would just show up at my house. So, reluctantly, I went with Mike that Saturday afternoon. The atmosphere in my in-laws' living room was tense. My mother-in-law sat in the main armchair, staring at me with a hostile expression. Beside her, Jessica, with her head down, pretended to be the world's most offended victim. My brother-in-law, David, just stared at his phone, bored. As soon as Mike and I walked in, my mother-in-law started yelling. "Sit down. Have you lost your mind? Your sister-in-law offers you all that money to help you, and instead of getting on your knees and thanking her, you throw a tantrum. You turn your back on good fortune when it comes knocking. You've gotten too big for your britches." I had to laugh. "Mom, it wasn't help. It was treating me like a maid. I'm her sister-in-law. How can I go to her house and make breakfast for money?" When I protested, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue and pointed a finger at me. "Maid, what nonsense. It's a sweet deal others would kill for. And you, in the mornings, after you drop the kids at school, what do you have to do? Nothing. What's the big deal about stopping by to make some soup? And you have the nerve to complain. Your sister-in-law is a busy woman. Think of it as helping her. And my time? I also have to get ready for the hospital, take care of my kids." But to my mother-in-law, my time was worthless. Then Jessica intervened in a syrupy voice. "Mom, calm down. It's just that Sarah is a bit immature. I understand her. Since she's only ever done manual labor, she must have some kind of complex. I proposed it with the best intentions, but it hurts that she's twisting it this way. Complex, best intentions." Every word out of her mouth chipped away at my patience. I could feel Mike, beside me, clenching his fists. He was holding back too. My brother-in-law, who had been silent until then, chimed in. "Sarah, you're going too far. My wife just wanted to help you out with some money, and you're twisting everything. Honestly, with your resume, where are you going to earn that kind of money?" The two of them, husband and wife, ganging up to humiliate me. I was about to explode. "Resume? For you too. Only money matters, right? If you don't have money, you don't even deserve the respect of being family. I'm just the servant of your house." "Mom, I can't take this anymore. I demand an apology from these people." I shot up from my seat and screamed. My mother-in-law, not to be outdone, also stood up. "Apology? Who needs to apologize to whom? You should be on your knees begging for forgiveness, and you dare to raise your voice? You think you can do whatever you want just because you're in my house? Sit down right now." The air in the living room grew cold. My mother-in-law's shout made the glasses in the china cabinet tremble. Mike stood up to calm me down, but at that moment, my mother-in-law, beside herself with rage, walked towards me. "Today, we're going to set things straight. I'm going to find out where you get this arrogance and teach you some manners." There was a murderous fury in her eyes. Jessica was smiling slightly, enjoying the show. How would this suffocating family meeting, this public trial against me, end? The tension in my in-laws' living room, tight as a bowstring, felt ready to snap. My mother-in-law's furious gaze burned me, and Jessica and David looked down on me like judges, arms crossed. I could feel my husband's fist, clenched white, beside me, but I had nowhere left to retreat. "Mom, have I said anything that isn't true? Your daughter treats me like a $500 maid, and I'm just supposed to take it? I have pride and dignity too." When I retorted, my voice trembling but firm, my mother-in-law let out an incredulous laugh and, her face red with rage, screamed, "Pride? Don't make me laugh. What pride could you possibly have when you don't have 2 nickels to rub together? You turn your back on a golden opportunity, and then you raise your voice." Her shout seemed to vibrate the glasses in the cabinet, but this time, I didn't back down either. The bitterness I had suppressed for so long erupted. "It's not an opportunity. It's a humiliation. Do you know what your daughter said to me? She mentioned my resume and belittled my work. You know how hard I work to pay off our debts and raise my children. How can you ask me to endure that humiliation? Don't you feel even a little bit of pity for me?" At my words, my mother-in-law lunged forward. Her stance was so threatening, it looked like she was about to pounce. "How dare you talk back to me? Do you compare yourself to your sister-in-law? She's a pharmacist who saves lives with her valuable hands, and you're a woman who's bankrupted her husband and her family. You don't know your place, and you dare to put yourself on her level. You come from a blue-collar background, do you understand? A woman who's bankrupted her husband." Those words, like a curse, were a sharp knife that plunged into my chest. Why was it my fault that my husband's business failed? Who had worked until her hands cracked, to pay off the debts. Instead of gratitude, a curse. Mom, you're going too far. What have I done to deserve this? I screamed, beside myself, and in that precise instant, my mother-in-law's hand flew through the air. Crack. A dry, sharp sound, and my head snapped to the side. It all happened so fast that, more than pain, I felt a strange confusion. A moment later, a burning heat rose in my left cheek. A deathly silence fell over the living room. I was so stunned I couldn't even look at her. I was paralyzed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jessica's expression. She was covering her mouth, feigning shock, but her eyes were smiling. It was a mocking smile that seemed to say, "You deserved that." In that moment, something inside me broke. It was over. This toxic relationship was finally over. As I held my cheek, trembling, I heard a loud crash beside me. "What are you doing?" It was my husband, Mike, the quiet man who normally never contradicted his mother, had kicked the coffee table with all his strength and jumped to his feet. The fruit bowl shattered, and apples rolled across the floor. My husband's eyes were bloodshot, as if he were about to cry tears of fire. "Mom, you hit my wife. What did she do to deserve that?" My husband's roar made my mother-in-law stumble back, but she quickly regained her composure and stood her ground. "And you dare to yell at your mother? This disrespectful brat shows no respect for her mother-in-law, and you expect me to just stand by? Get a grip. For defending a woman like her, your business failed, and now look at the life you live." At his mother's words, my husband let out a bitter laugh and, with a terrifying expression, looked back and forth between his mother and his brother's family. "My business failed? That's on me. She had nothing to do with it. On the contrary, when I was drowning in debt, she didn't run away. She worked herself to the bone to keep our family afloat. She is my savior. This woman you all look down on is worth 100,000 times more than your magnificent pharmacist daughter-in-law." My husband's voice was almost a cry of pain. Hearing him, the sting of the slap faded, and my heart clenched. I could only cry. "Mike, calm down. You're going to scare Mom." My brother-in-law intervened, and Mike shot him a withering look. "You're just as bad. Is my wife your maid? You toss her $500 and treat her like a servant and then laugh about it? I saw you. I saw perfectly how your wife was smirking while my wife was getting slapped." Hearing this, Jessica turned pale and waved her hands in denial, but it was too late. Mike took my hand firmly and helped me up. He squeezed it so tightly it hurt, but his warmth was the only thing holding me up. "Let's go, Sarah. We don't have to put up with this miserable treatment." My husband turned to his mother one last time and said coldly, "Mom, no, ma'am. Now, just as you always wanted, you can have your rich daughter-in-law and your son who works for a multinational corporation. Be happy with them forever and ever. We are nothing to you anymore. Don't ever look for us again. Not even when you're dying. We're cutting all ties." "What? You're going to cut ties with your own mother for that woman?" My mother-in-law screamed, collapsing to the floor in a heap of tears. But Mike didn't even turn around. He pulled me out of the house. The slam of the door echoed, and with it, the hell of that family finally ended. As we rode down in the elevator, my husband never let go of my hand. The moment we got in the car, he rested his head on the steering wheel and cried like a child. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Because of me. Because I was such a failure. You had to go through all this. I'm sorry." I hugged him and cried with him. They weren't tears of sadness. Even though I had been hit, the fact that my husband, who I thought would never stand up for me, had defended me so fiercely, and the feeling of liberation from finally breaking free from that nightmare, made me cry with relief. We immediately started planning our move. My husband blocked all of his family's numbers and asked me to do the same. With our security deposit and a small loan, we moved to a town 2 hours away from his parents' house, almost in secret. Though it was a small rental apartment, our first night there was the most peaceful and sweet of my life. I no longer had to go to my in-laws' house on weekends to endure their stares or suffer Jessica's contempt. They say fortune is fickle, don't they? When I fled my in-laws' house after that slap, I never imagined that life would smile on me. I just clung to the feeling of freedom from having escaped that hell. But 2 years after cutting ties, my husband's and my life took a 180-degree turn. Ironically, just as the entire world was plunged into the chaos of the pandemic and everyone was complaining, a miraculous opportunity came my husband's way. As people spent more time at home, the demand for home renovations and interior design skyrocketed. My husband had always been hardworking and honest. He never cut corners on materials, and that integrity finally started to pay off. He began with small repairs in the neighborhood, but because his work was so meticulous, word of mouth spread like wildfire. On local mom forums and neighborhood Facebook groups, he was recommended as an honest professional, a golden handyman. Suddenly, his schedule was booked solid for the next 6 months. My husband's phone never stopped ringing, and he was soon juggling 3 projects at once. One night, Mike came home late from work. From the pocket of his dust-covered work overalls, he pulled out a crumpled bank book and handed it to me. "Sarah, look. This is this month's revenue." I opened it without much thought and nearly fell over. In the book was a number that not only covered all our debts, but was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I counted the zeros again and again, in disbelief. I looked at my husband, stunned. "Mike, where did all this money come from? Did we really pay off all the debts? The creditors won't call anymore." My husband, with his calloused hands, wiped away my tears and smiled. "Of course, and there's plenty left over. From now on, we're going to live like royalty. I'm going to make up for all the years of suffering. Thank you for trusting me and staying by my side." We held each other and cried. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion and gratitude. My husband incorporated his business into an LLC and opened a proper office. I no longer had to work at the hospital or in a restaurant kitchen. I got a business card made that said office manager for my husband's company and started enjoying elegant lunches. I became a lady. And the biggest change was our home. We moved into the luxury penthouse of a new high-rise building we had always dreamed of. The massive living room window overlooked a lake, and the floors were marble. For our family, that apartment was a palace. On moving day, after cleaning thoroughly, I watched my kids run through the living room, shouting with joy, and I felt like I had everything. "Mom, we have our own rooms." Listening to their laughter, I stood by the window and made a promise to myself. Never, ever again would I return to that miserable life of the past. I would show the people who had looked down on us just how well we were living. And the strangest part is that while our fortunes were soaring, theirs, my former in-laws, were about to be hit by a torrential downpour. My sister-in-law, emboldened by her pharmacy's success, had gone deep into debt to buy an entire commercial building in a new development. Her plan was to live off the rental income, but with the pandemic, businesses started closing, and she was left with an empty building. The only thing coming out of it was dust, and the interest on her loan was growing like a snowball. To make matters worse, trying to fix the situation, she got into high-risk investments like options and futures, which are basically gambling. Word got around that, trying to cover an unmanageable debt with the pharmacy's income, she had lost every last penny she had. An acquaintance from our old neighborhood called me, buzzing with excitement, to tell me the news. "Girl, have you heard? Your sister-in-law, that stuck-up pharmacist, she's ruined. Lost millions in the stock market. The creditors showed up at the pharmacy and made a huge scene. Your mother-in-law ended up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. The family is completely destroyed." Hearing it, I felt more fear than joy. I thought, karma really does exist. She was reaping what she had sown. She was paying dearly for treating me like a maid and humiliating me. It was rumored that Jessica had lost so much hair from stress that she was wearing a wig, and that my brother-in-law, the brilliant researcher, was on the verge of being disciplined at his company because of the constant calls from creditors. Their prestigious titles had become a noose around their necks. It was then that my mother-in-law remembered her eldest son, the one she had kicked out. She must have heard from someone that we were doing wonderfully. I started getting calls from blocked or unknown numbers. At first, I answered, not knowing who it was, but on the other end, I heard a familiar, unpleasant voice. "Hello? Sarah, it's me, your mother-in-law. Can you hear me?" My heart jumped into my throat, and a chill ran down my spine. But I stayed calm. I took a deep breath, hung up without a word, and immediately blocked the number. I told my husband, and he snorted. Good. What nerve, calling us now? She must have realized we changed our numbers and started digging. Pathetic. It turned out my mother-in-law had been desperately searching for our contact information, asking our old landlord, my husband's former suppliers. It was clear that Jessica, out of pride, didn't dare contact us directly and was using her mother to try to reach us. I could just picture Jessica, sitting in some cheap rental, pressuring her. Mom, I heard Mike is doing great. Call him and ask for money. We're his family. He won't leave us hanging. He's your eldest son. I could imagine it perfectly. But no way. Remembering all the humiliations I suffered, I wouldn't give them a single cent. Sometimes, at night in bed, memories of the past would come back to me. The weekends cleaning Jessica's house, selling my dignity for $500. Mike, I'd say, nudging my husband. We really made it, huh? He, half asleep, would hug me and rest his head on my arm. Thanks to you. I love you. I just prayed that this peace and happiness would never be broken, and that those people, my former family, would never appear in our lives again. Do you know what the word shame means? It's the capacity to feel embarrassment, but over time, I've discovered that some people are born without it, like my sister-in-law and brother-in-law. That day, the weather was splendid. My husband had left for work early, and after dropping the kids at school, I was peacefully cleaning the house. With the windows open, the curtains danced in the breeze, and sunlight streamed into the living room. This is happiness, I thought. I put on my favorite music and was about to enjoy a cup of coffee when the intercom buzzed, shattering the silence. Ding dong. I wasn't expecting a package. Who could it be? I looked at the screen and almost dropped my mug. The faces I saw were of the people I never wanted to see again. Not even in my worst nightmares. The people I wanted to erase from my life forever. It was Jessica and David. And they looked pathetic. Jessica, who used to look like she'd stepped out of a luxury boutique window, was wearing a worn-out t-shirt, her hair a mess. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her skin was dull. If I had passed her on the street, I wouldn't have recognized her. David was the same. The high-powered researcher, who always looked so sharp, was wearing a grimy jacket and was hunched over. My heart started pounding, and my hands went cold. How had they found us? My husband had kept it a secret. Who is it? I asked into the intercom, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Jessica pressed her face to the camera and said in a tearful voice, Sarah, it's me, Jessica. Please, let us in. We have nowhere else to go. Please, Sarah. Her calling me by my name gave me chills. Where was the arrogance of the woman who had treated me like a $500 maid? I hesitated for a moment. I could call security and have them removed. But I knew if I did, they would just come back. Okay, let's settle this once and for all. I took a deep breath and buzzed them in. The moment the door opened, they rushed in like cornered animals and dropped to their knees in front of me. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I made an unforgivable mistake. Please, save me. Jessica grabbed onto my pant leg and started sobbing uncontrollably. My brother-in-law, beside her with his head bowed, mumbled, Sarah, I'm too ashamed to even look at you. The situation was bizarre. More than satisfaction, I felt a bitterness seeing how low money could bring a person. How did you find us? We didn't tell anyone we moved, I asked coldly. Jessica answered between sobs. It was his mom. She hired a private investigator. We've known you lived here for days, but we were too afraid to come. Today, the creditors showed up at the pharmacy and caused a huge scene, and we had to run. Sarah, I honestly just want to die. A private investigator. My mother-in-law's obsession knew no bounds. And what do you want? You didn't just come here to apologize. At my question, Jessica glanced up at me and, in a barely audible voice, revealed her true intentions. Sarah, could you lend us $100,000 to get by? Or $50,000? Anything. If we don't pay the interest right now, we'll lose the pharmacy, and I'll be blacklisted. Your business is doing great. You've made so much money. We're family. Please. $100,000. asking me for $100,000, the person she had treated like a $500 maid. Jessica, have you lost your mind? Since when are we family? I still remember your expression 2 years ago when your mother-in-law slapped me. I remember it perfectly. When you treated me like a maid, you laughed. And now you come here begging for money? Do you have any shame at all? When I spat all this at her, she clung to me, crying even harder. Sarah, I wasn't thinking straight back then. I was crazy. I'll pay you back everything. I'll pay interest. Please just help me this one time. Think of my kids. They don't even have enough to eat. At the mention of the children, my heart faltered. As hateful as Jessica was, her kids were not to blame. Maybe I should give them something so they could eat. As I was hesitating, I heard the sound of the front door lock turning. Click. Sarah, I'm home. Got off early today. It was my husband, back from work. He walked in smiling, holding a tray of my favorite sushi in one hand and snacks for the kids in the other. When he saw the two people kneeling on the living room floor, he froze. What? What are you two doing here? How did you find us? My husband's expression hardened instantly. He dropped the sushi and snacks by the door and strode towards them. Intimidated, Jessica and David recoiled. Hey, Mike, how's it going? David tried to greet him with a forced smile, but my husband, without responding, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. How's it going? And you have the nerve to ask? Get out of my house, now. I told you I never wanted to see you again. My husband's shout echoed through the apartment. Jessica grabbed onto his pants. Mike, please, help us just this once. We have nowhere to go. If you lend us $100,000, we'll be forever grateful. Your mom is having a hard time in a tiny rental. You're the oldest son. You can't just abandon your parents and your brother, the oldest son. My husband let out a sharp laugh and roughly pushed Jessica's hand away. The oldest son? I'm only the oldest son when you need money. When my business failed and I was struggling, did you treat me like a person? Did you ever even buy me a meal? No. You exploited my wife. You belittled her, and you mocked her. What nerve do you have coming here? My husband, breathless, unleashed a torrent of truths I'll never forget. And you, Jessica? I remember your face perfectly when my wife was hit. That little smirk, it's burned into my memory. Do you know how many tears my wife has shed? And now you come here to put on this show? You make me sick. Get out, right now. Jessica turned pale and stood trembling, unable to say a word. Before I'd give you two any money, I'd throw it in the street or donate it to charity. You won't get a single cent from me. If you need money so badly, go ask your precious mother, the one you love so much. My husband threw the door wide open. Out! If you're not gone by the count of 3, I'm calling the police. If you don't want to end up in jail for trespassing, get lost. 1. As my husband started the countdown, David was the first to get up, pulling on Jessica. Let's go, Jessica. He's really going to call the cops. Let's go. No, I'm not leaving. If we leave here, we're done for. Mike, please. Jessica resisted, but my husband was unmoved. 2. My husband pulled out his phone and started dialing 911. Terrified, David dragged Jessica out. As he pulled her, she cursed at me. Sarah, you have no heart. Karma will get you for this. But instead of fear, I just felt pity. 3. Slam. The slam of the door restored peace to our home. My husband, after locking it, was still furious. I went to him and rubbed his back. Mike, calm down. They're gone. They won't be back. My husband hugged me and sighed deeply on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Sarah. Because of me, those people bothered you again. Are you okay? I'm fine. Thanks to you, I feel great. When you told them to go ask their mother for money, I almost applauded. We looked at each other and smiled bitterly. It was sad to have things come to this with family, but they had brought it on themselves. After that day, my sister-in-law's family completely fell apart. Following our refusal, the creditors hounded them to the point where they had to sell their house and the pharmacy for pennies on the dollar. My brother-in-law was fired from his company due to the constant creditor calls and, according to the rumors, now drives for Uber to survive. And my mother-in-law, the snob, went to live with Jessica's family in a basement rental for $300 a month. They say the sounds of the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law screaming at each other daily can be heard throughout the neighborhood. "You ruined my son! Give me my money back! You were the one who encouraged me to invest. It's all your fault, you crazy old woman." Every time news of their miserable life reached me, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. How could someone fall so low for money, for family? But one thing is clear: karma exists. They were paying, with interest, for every single one of my tears. I no longer live anchored in the past. By my side, I have a husband who loves me more than life itself and wonderful children. Life has its strange moments. The memories that once caused you unbearable pain fade, and you even come to think that if it weren't for those moments, you wouldn't be who you are today. For me, that moment was the day my mother-in-law slapped me. Right now, I'm sitting on my sofa, watching the sunset through the window. The bouquet of flowers my husband brought home from work gives off a sweet scent, and from the kitchen, I can hear my children laughing as they have their afternoon snack. There was a time when I thought this peace, this warmth, wasn't meant for me. In the days when I was drowning in debt and fear of my in-laws, it was a luxury I couldn't even imagine. But now, everything is different. I see my husband and kids off in the morning. I go to the gym, I enjoy my hobbies, and I have time for myself. Sometimes, through a friend from the old neighborhood, news of my former in-laws reaches me. "Girl, have you heard? They say they're getting kicked out of the basement now. The daughter-in-law ran off." Seriously? They say the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law got into a fistfight and the police had to be called. What a mess. People gossip, but it doesn't affect me anymore. Before, maybe I would have felt a sense of satisfaction, but now I'm just indifferent. They don't even deserve my compassion. They are just a bad memory in my life, a toxic relationship I never want to encounter again. Sometimes, I even feel a certain gratitude towards my mother-in-law. If she hadn't slapped me that day, if my husband hadn't kicked that table and we hadn't run, perhaps we'd still be trapped in that hell, dragged down with them. That slap was what broke the chain and woke us up. It's ironic, isn't it? What are you thinking about? My husband comes over and puts his arm around my shoulders. Nothing. Just remembering the past. I smile wistfully, and my husband takes my hand seriously. "Sarah, I still think about that day and wake up in a cold sweat. I will regret for the rest of my life not defending you in that very instant. You suffered so much because of me." I see his eyes well up and feel a lump in my throat. This man still feels guilty for what happened. "Mike, don't say that. Thanks to you, I'm happy now. When you took my hand and pulled me out of there, I felt like you were saving me. It was the first time I ever felt what it was like to have someone on my side." My husband kisses the back of my hand and swears to me, "I will be loyal to you for the rest of my life. You will never shed another tear. I will protect our children and you with my life. I love you." Sarah, his clumsy but sincere words, dissolve the last traces of resentment in my heart. This is happiness. It isn't about having a lot of money or living in a beautiful house. It's having someone by your side who loves and values you for who you are. I understand that now. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law lived obsessed with money and status, and in the end, all they were left with was ruin and mutual hatred. I, on the other hand, though I had nothing, tried to protect the love and trust of my family, and I have received the greatest reward. Some might think revenge is about stomping on and destroying the other person, but from my experience, the perfect revenge isn't that. It's living so well and being so happy that you couldn't care less how they are living. It's showing them your happiness until their stomachs ache with envy. That is the best revenge. I no longer live tied to the pain of the past. Before me, I have only my husband, my children, and a future full of hope. Sometimes, I look up at the night sky and think of them, shivering from the cold and blaming each other in that basement. And I hope that the warm light from my living room reaches them, and that they realize that they see just how dazzling the life of the daughter-in-law, the sister-in-law they despised so much, has become.